The Johnson family thought they had found peace after years of grief when 4-year-old Emma suddenly stopped playing with her dolls and said, "Daddy, I remember when I died in the fire with Mommy before I came back to you." What followed would shatter Mark Johnson's carefully constructed life and force him to confront the impossible possibility that his daughter might actually be the reincarnation of his wife, who had perished in a house fire 3 years before Emma was born. Mark had lost his wife Sarah in a devastating house fire in 2018, a tragedy that had destroyed not only his home, but his will to live. Sarah had been trapped on the 2nd floor when an electrical fault ignited their bedroom, and despite the efforts of firefighters, she had succumbed to smoke inhalation before they could reach her. Mark had been working late that night, a fact that haunted him with guilt every day since the tragedy. After 2 years of grief counseling and slowly rebuilding his life, Mark had met Jennifer, a compassionate nurse who helped him learn to love again. They married in 2020, and Emma was born in 2021, bringing joy back into Mark's world. The little girl had been the light of his life, her bright personality and infectious laughter helping to heal wounds he thought would never mend. Emma's first disturbing comment about the fire came without warning during a quiet afternoon at home. She had been playing peacefully when she suddenly looked up at Mark with an expression of profound sadness and began describing the smell of smoke, the sound of crackling flames, and the feeling of being scared and unable to breathe. Jennifer had been in the kitchen when she heard Emma's words and rushed into the living room, finding Mark frozen in shock. The 4-year-old continued her description with chilling accuracy, explaining how she had tried to get to the window, but the smoke was too thick, how she had called for Daddy, but he wasn't there, and how she had felt sleepy and peaceful at the end. Emma spoke without the fear or confusion that would be expected from a child describing such trauma, but rather with the resigned acceptance of someone recounting a lived experience. Mark's hands trembled as he asked Emma how she could know about the fire, since it had happened before she was born. The little girl looked at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face and said simply, "Because I was Mommy Sarah then, and now I'm Emma, but I'm still me inside." The matter-of-fact way she delivered this revelation made it even more unsettling. Jennifer, who had never met Sarah but had heard countless stories about her, was deeply disturbed by Emma's claims. As a medical professional, she was inclined to seek rational explanations, but Emma's knowledge seemed to extend far beyond anything she could have overheard or imagined. The child began describing details of the house that had burned down, details that Mark had never shared with anyone. Emma described the layout of the bedroom where Sarah had died, mentioning the position of the bed relative to the windows, the color of the curtains that had caught fire first, and even the specific location of a jewelry box that had been destroyed in the blaze. She spoke about trying to reach the window that faced the backyard, the same window that firefighters had later identified as Sarah's most likely escape route if the smoke hadn't overcome her first. The child's knowledge extended beyond the physical, details of the fire to include emotional memories that seemed to come from Sarah's perspective. Emma would talk about feeling sorry for leaving Daddy alone, worrying about who would take care of him, and hoping that he would find love again someday. These concerns perfectly matched thoughts that Sarah had expressed to friends about her fears regarding Mark's tendency toward depression and isolation. Mark found himself interrogating his 4-year-old daughter with questions that felt both necessary and absurd. When he asked Emma about Sarah's favorite foods, she immediately mentioned the lavender honey that Sarah had ordered from a small farm in Oregon, a detail so specific that it couldn't be coincidental. Emma also described Sarah's habit of humming while doing dishes, specifically mentioning the Beatles song "Here Comes the Sun" that had been Sarah's go-to tune for mundane tasks. The most shocking moment came when Emma led Mark to a closet in their current home and pointed to a box he had stored on the highest shelf, saying she wanted to see her pretty rings. The box contained Sarah's jewelry collection, items that Mark had packed away after the fire and never mentioned to Emma or Jennifer. The child recognized each piece immediately, describing when and why Sarah had acquired different items with perfect accuracy. Emma's recognition of Sarah's engagement ring was particularly emotional. She held the ring with reverence and said, She remembered how happy she had been when Mark had proposed, describing the restaurant where it had happened, and even mentioning the nervousness Mark had felt that night. These were private memories that Mark had shared with no one, making Emma's knowledge impossible to explain through conventional means. Jennifer struggled with the implications of Emma's claims, feeling as though she was competing with a ghost for her family's emotional loyalty. The situation was complicated by Emma's insistence that she loved Jennifer as her current mommy, while also maintaining that she had been Mark's wife in a previous life. The 4-year-old seemed unable to understand why this would be confusing or upsetting for the adults. Mark contacted Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychologist who specialized in childhood trauma and unusual psychological phenomena. Dr. Williams had encountered cases of apparent past life memories before and approached Emma's situation with professional curiosity rather than automatic skepticism. Her initial interviews with Emma revealed a consistency and emotional authenticity that suggested genuine memories rather than fantasy or attention-seeking behavior. Dr. Williams arranged for Emma to be interviewed by Dr. Michael Chen, a researcher who had studied reincarnation cases for decades. Dr. Chen was impressed by Emma's ability to provide specific details about Sarah's life that went far beyond the fire itself. The child described Sarah's childhood, her college experiences, her career as a teacher, and even private conversations she had shared with Mark during their marriage. Emma's knowledge of Sarah's professional life was particularly compelling. She described the elementary school where Sarah had taught, mentioning specific colleagues by name, and even recalling challenging students that Sarah had worked with during her final year of teaching. When Dr. Chen contacted the school to verify these details, administrators confirmed that Emma's descriptions were accurate, down to the smallest particulars. The child also demonstrated knowledge of Sarah's family relationships that Mark had never discussed. Emma described Sarah's complicated relationship with her mother, mentioning specific arguments and reconciliations that had occurred during Sarah and Mark's marriage. She even knew about a secret that Sarah had kept regarding her father's drinking problem, information that Sarah had shared only with Mark during their most intimate conversations. Mark found himself torn between wonder and grief as Emma continued to reveal memories that seemed to come directly from Sarah's consciousness. Part of him was thrilled at the possibility that his beloved wife had somehow returned to him, while another part felt guilty about the impact this was having on Jennifer and their current family dynamic. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Emma mentioned details about the night of the fire that had never been made public. She described seeing someone in the backyard just before the fire started, someone who had seemed to be watching the house. This revelation prompted Mark to contact Detective Sarah Rodriguez, who had investigated the fire and had always suspected that it might not have been accidental. Detective Rodriguez had kept the case file open because certain evidence had never aligned with the official conclusion of electrical malfunction. There had been signs of accelerant near the electrical panel, and neighbors had reported seeing a suspicious vehicle in the area on the night of the fire. Emma's description of a person watching from the backyard provided a new piece of the puzzle that reignited the investigation. Emma's detailed description of the suspected arsonist matched the description of David Morrison, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, who had been questioned after the fire, but released due to lack of evidence. Emma described Morrison's distinctive walk, his habit of wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, and even mentioned a specific scar on his hand that was visible in police photographs, but had never been publicized. The child's memories of the moments before the fire revealed that Sarah had been awakened by sounds outside, and had gone to the window to investigate just as the flames began to spread. Emma described seeing Morrison's face clearly in the moonlight, and realizing that he had set the fire deliberately. This information provided investigators with a motive and timeline that aligned with physical evidence they had been unable to explain. Mark was devastated to learn that Sarah's death might have been murder rather than accident, but Emma's memories provided the breakthrough that investigators needed to pursue Morrison again. The child's detailed account of the fire's origin and progression matched forensic evidence that had previously seemed contradictory or inconclusive. Emma also revealed that Sarah had tried to call Mark from her cell phone as the fire spread, but the call hadn't gone through due to poor reception. Phone records confirmed that an attempted call had been made from Sarah's phone at the exact time Emma described, a detail that added credibility to her other claims and provided investigators with a precise timeline of events. The emotional toll on Mark was enormous as he processed the revelation that his wife had been murdered and that his daughter somehow carried her memories of the crime. Emma's matter-of-fact descriptions of dying were heartbreaking, but her apparent lack of trauma suggested that she had processed the experience from a perspective beyond normal childhood understanding. Jennifer found herself in the impossible position of supporting her husband through this crisis, while feeling increasingly displaced by the presence of his deceased wife's memories in their daughter. Emma's claims were affecting every aspect of their family life, from bedtime routines to meal preferences that reflected Sarah's tastes rather than Emma's own developing personality. Dr. Williams worked with the family to establish boundaries and coping strategies that would allow Emma to integrate her past life memories without losing her current identity. The child's psychological development was carefully monitored to ensure that her claims of being Sarah reincarnated didn't interfere with her growth as Emma Johnson. The police investigation gained momentum as Emma provided additional details that led to new evidence against Morrison. The child described conversations she had overheard between Morrison and an accomplice, mentioning specific plans and motivations that investigators could use to build their case. Emma's memories suggested that Morrison had been motivated by jealousy and a desire for revenge after Sarah had rejected his attempts to reconcile. Morrison was arrested based on the new evidence, much of which had been uncovered as a direct result of Emma's revelations. During questioning, he eventually confessed to setting the fire, admitting that he had intended to scare Sarah, but hadn't expected the flames to spread so quickly or trap her upstairs. His confession validated Emma's memories and provided closure for the case that had haunted investigators for years. The trial that followed was complicated by the unusual source of the key evidence, but Emma's memories had led to concrete physical evidence and Morrison's own confession. Mark testified about his daughter's impossible knowledge of details that only Sarah could have known, providing context for how the investigation had been reopened. Emma's role in solving her own murder from a previous life created unprecedented legal and philosophical questions about the nature of memory, identity, and justice. While the court couldn't officially recognize past life memories as evidence, the concrete leads they had provided resulted in a conviction that brought closure to Sarah's family and friends. The emotional healing that followed Morrison's conviction was complex and multifaceted. Mark found peace in knowing that Sarah's killer had been brought to justice, but he struggled with the ongoing presence of his wife's memories in his daughter. Emma continued to demonstrate knowledge of Sarah's life while developing her own personality and interests as she grew older. Jennifer gradually found ways to accept Emma's unique situation, recognizing that the child's memories of being Sarah were part of what made her special, rather than a threat to their current family. The experience ultimately strengthened their bond, as Jennifer helped Emma navigate the complexity of carrying memories from a previous life. Emma's memories of the fire gradually became less vivid as she grew older, following patterns observed in other cases of childhood past life recall. However, her connection to Sarah's consciousness continued to manifest in subtle ways, including artistic abilities and knowledge that seemed to come from beyond her current life experience. The case attracted international attention from researchers studying consciousness and survival after death. Emma's detailed memories of her death and subsequent reincarnation provided compelling evidence for the continuity of consciousness beyond physical death and the possibility that traumatic deaths might create stronger reincarnation memories. Dr. Chen documented Emma's case extensively, finding it to be one of the most evidentially strong examples of reincarnation he had encountered. The combination of verifiable historical details, emotional authenticity, and practical consequences made Emma's memories impossible to dismiss as fantasy or coincidence. Years later, Emma retained only fragments of her memories as Sarah, but the impact of her revelations continued to influence her family's understanding of life, death, and justice. The solution to Sarah's murder had provided closure that might never have been possible without Emma's impossible memories of her previous life. The little girl who remembered dying in a fire had not only solved her own murder, but it also demonstrated the profound ways that love and consciousness can transcend even the most tragic circumstances. Her story continues to inspire questions about the nature of identity and the possibility that some connections between souls are so strong they can survive death and return to provide healing and justice. Mark eventually found peace in believing that Sarah's love had been so strong that she had found a way to return to him, bringing justice for her murder while blessing him with the daughter they had always planned to have together. Emma's presence in his life felt like both a gift from Sarah and a promise that love truly is eternal. If this incredible story of a daughter who remembered her mother's murder from a previous life has moved you and opened your mind to the mysteries of consciousness and the power of love to transcend death, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories that prove the bonds between souls can overcome any obstacle, even death itself.